Hey guys, it's going to be another Unleashed video, and it's going to be kind of short, but I just want to talk about these hard surface mechanical components like this. And when you start modeling things like this, it's really about capturing the forms and shapes and dimensions first more than anything else. When you see details on things like this, a lot of times you're not even going to make these things for game models. There's no point in adding the rigidity necessarily on the inside of the structure. You might be better off just solidifying it and doing something like this. And so, and all these little extra details, like all this fun stuff, these are shapes you might want to actually capture. And so you're going to approach your blockouts more than likely as something like just a really rough concept model. And it helps out a lot when you're trying to later on just make them more detailed with subdivision, because when you look at real world stuff, there's a lot of detail to it, right? You might not need all of this when you're creating game models necessarily. Like some of this stuff could just probably be done in like Substance Painter with height maps, right? Just it turned into a normal map, right? You could just paint it in half the time. And so the big overall forms, shapes, that's what you need to focus on a lot of times. Don't get stressed out over every little detail when modeling. Like if you are just trying to make like that rotor, for example, or a piece of that rotor, it's really about just capturing that shape to some degree, at least. Anyways, so blockout meshes, guys. I'm telling you, through and through, the blockout mesh is the most important thing. Because you're going to have other mechanical components, parts, pieces that might rely off of these, and you might have things that intersect with each other that were forged together or welded or whatever. You can always work with additional meshes, and you can make things happen relatively fast this way. Whereas if you're just trying to do like subdivision straight from the start, you're really kind of messing yourself up in the process, because there's like little variations, little changes, and you just have to take your time with them and just start working with them. Now, obviously, I'm not going to model this whole thing, but the idea still stands, and this is what you'll end up be doing more than likely. Oops, I didn't grab all the way through. And so, like, if we have something like this going on, you see our origin points here in the center still. This is good. This is what we want, because sometimes these pieces kind of replicate themselves, like top and bottom. This is something almost like a suspension of a vehicle as well. So if we mirror it on Z, there, we're done with that like that. These parts might come back together at some point somehow. And so you would want to bisect it. You see where we're getting at with this? Now we have kind of like the topology not doing what I want here. So let's do this instead. All right. And we could just keep working it basically. Like we can keep going, trying to figure out what we did right, what we did wrong maybe in this area. And extruding, taking it a little step further. We're not doing detail on it yet. We're not doing detail passes anyways. Could delete some things and then press F, fill it back in. You see what I'm saying? All right. So at some point, all these different little components, they start to go back together, which is great. But we won't struggle so much to get to that point. We can Boolean them together. We can subdivision model them together. It's all kinds of stuff we can do later on. Like this one might go up here. Whoop, before we go there. All right. This is how you build up that complexity to everything, basically. Start doing things like this. So this one actually runs into the center cylindrical section. So I don't have to go too much further with that one. Loop cut it. So this is what you're going to end up having to do when you're creating mechs. A lot of stuff like this, basically. Just a lot of blockout first, trying to figure out the shapes overall. And basically just start working it. This obviously probably hinges in here somehow or something. I don't know. It could be doing all kinds of crazy weird stuff. But that's where just paying attention to your references more than I am right now probably would help you out a lot. Whoops. Apparently I did something wrong there. A lot of times these end sections like this, I like to just Make him a big N-gon. Control exit. And that one could go up maybe. Yeah, it could. Could also extrude it like that, scale it in. Then run this flush. So we got something like that. So use triangles too. Don't be afraid of triangles, or even simple N-gons could be useful during this part, this process. If you got cylindrical shapes, obviously make cylindrical shapes. There's no reason not to. Or little curves, and use simplified bevels and things like that. Right. And if you have to use booleans, use booleans. Like there's going to be times you see something like this and you're like, this shape is supposed to do something like this, maybe. But a little trick about if you're going to use booleans, if you're going for non-destructive bevels, set the bevel weights to 1, add a bevel modifier, and switch it over to weight. And now you can bevel like this, right? You set the segment counts to whatever you need. Geometry, just remember outer emitter arc usually on a lot of things. In our case, not so much, it doesn't matter, but we can do base shape, boolean. Of course, having hard ops, box cutter, and all that, super useful, or bool tools even to do booleans. If you want to mirror this object, mirror it across the main shape that disappeared, which tends to happen sometimes. Let's go back a second. I'm just going to call it main for now. I don't know what I would call it, but we'll do the boolean again, or the mirror. I'll go across the main. Okay, and we're going to move this to a new collection. So press M, cutters. So that way you can hit 1 and your cutters collection will hide. Hit 2, everything hides but 2. 1, everything hides but 1. Shift 2 will bring it back. Okay. So if you ever need to cut out kind of shapes like that, you can. And because this cutter now is over here, you can give it a name if you wanted to, but the segment counts are adjustable, obviously. So we can continue to tweak it as needed later on. So now, is this perfect? Obviously not. I'm kind of rushing through it, but it gives you an idea of like how you can take a mesh like that and get started on it. And when you are converting this into like subdivision, this is probably what you want, a more blocky kind of simplistic mesh. Not always the case, but usually it kind of is. And if you're going to do like heavy Boolean N-gon stuff, obviously, any chance you get it to use like the bevel modifier or weighted bevels, things like that, take advantage of them. But usually it's about finding the shapes, the forms, the big ideas of them. And then later on, you could duplicate this and you don't even have to destroy like the bevel setup or anything. You could duplicate it, Shift D, and then right click, keep it in place and convert it to a mesh, send it out here. So this is more or less like, if in a mechanical sense, it's like a footprint it creates like specifications for your object. You do these at scale or at size. And that way, it has like a restriction to it, right? Like whenever you're doing something like this, you just set kind of boundaries for yourself. Like stage 1, you're just figuring out the shapes, the forms, how they lock with each other, maybe setting up pivot points so that they can function if they need to function. So you're thinking about form and function mostly, right? And then later on, when you get something like this, now you can think about like, what can we do to kind of speed up this process to convert this into a nicer mesh, whether it's going to be Boolean N-gon or subdivision. In our case, a bevel on this would probably do a lot of heavy lifting. And I'm going to apply it just for now. Actually, let's do the profile shape of 1. And then we can do KC. We can cut through the mesh a little bit to start quadding this out, basically, right? So that's the trick with a lot of stuff like this, is you got to approach it in this manner, perhaps. You can see we got this on in edit mode. Let's turn it off for a second. All right. And let's apply it now. You'll see it has issues in some areas, but we'd go back and we'd just fix it if it has issues, basically. Like right here, we could probably just use a knife cut and take it all the way through and dissolve that. We can mirror it if needed. If we hit Control-2 and we start to subdivide, we'll see what's working, what's not working. The holding edges are mostly done by those bevels. And so we only have to really do some additional cleanup here to get this into a more usable state. Now, if you wanted to go ahead and do another pass on this, where you cut in more detail before you go to subdivision, you possibly could, but you could do it afterwards too. It's not really the end of the world. So if you wanted like a little cutout here, perhaps, maybe we do like K and Z down. This one we should get away with an extrude manifold of all things, I think. Oh, almost, not quite. Didn't quite get there with that one, but it was close. Anyways, so we'd work that out now, basically. Like this is a selection. We could do select loops, boundary loops. We might be able to do that, except it didn't select the front for some reason. And so we'll go through to the front, bevel, shape of 1. Right, and so then we'd have to work out the back a little bit. In our case, this would probably go out to like right there. That would probably go out to there, not all the way over there like that. Merge that last, dissolve that for a second. All right, so eventually we can work all this out into a nicer subdivision mesh and not have it contorting like that. And straighten it up and all that fun stuff, right? Yeah, so see where that's going now? That's the main idea of this whole process. So I'm going to do a quick cut through here. This will end up with another edge doing that. We'll delete that one for now. You could use vertex snapping. It's very useful. So you can grab edges like this, perhaps. Press E, hold control, snap it down. We don't need that one. A and merge by distance. Right? And so let's just mirror it real quick. And mirror it on before the subdivision. On X, flip it if needed. Right? I'm going to apply it just for now. But yeah, stuff like this in here, obviously, sometimes it won't grid fill right off the bat. You might have to do some stuff like this. Maybe you can get it to grid fill now. Maybe it doesn't have enough loop cuts. Maybe you got to change the offset and the span and do all kinds of other fun stuff to get it to work the way you expect it to. But for the most part, you can eventually get it to work. That's the main idea. So like this edge, I could have brought down here and redirected over there, right? So this middle section here, if we grid fill that, it goes crazy. Let's not do that then. Instead, let's just grab these, extrude, 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 snap, snap, right? And this one we could fill. This we can fill to an N-gon, right? See how that works out. Oh, yeah, it's an N-gon. Sometimes these edges give you problems, right? So let's grab through there. Let's try it again. Should be able to knife cut that. Say out to here. I'll take that one over. I'll create a quad like that. This is going to fall apart more than likely. A, M, merge by distance, and then mirror, right? Bisect, flip, reorder. And I'm going to apply it just so we can look at it again. And so, yeah, we would definitely want to continue working on these, obviously, so we get better subdivision results. But that's how you start to work with these more primitive shapes anyways. And then, you know, you're going to possibly have to work this into it as well at some point. So if that's ever the case, you know, you have to do it, unfortunately, but you probably would want to maybe do it all at the same time as opposed to what I'm doing, but we'll align the objects real quick on X. So there's nothing that says you get rid of that subdivision for a moment. You can't do a Boolean real quick and do union, attach them, apply it. Original shape, we can probably just delete now. All right. And so we would have to figure how to get this all to work in this spot now too, right? And that would just require going back through and doing more knife cuts, perhaps, deleting some interior faces if they showed up, or whatever else might be going on in here. But you're only working half this object. You're not working the whole object. And that's the main idea anyways, right? So eventually it'll all subdivide together, look really nice. You can see even without subdivision, it's starting to look nice. This is getting close to what mid-poly workflow is all about, where you let the model itself hold its shading, and it'll actually look like it's beveled everywhere. Well, because it is beveled. But you could use chamfers with weighted normals and it would look beveled like that too. So, and yeah, so it's just one of those things like that. Now, so with that out of the way, this is how you creep up to the detail you need, as opposed to just going straight for that detail from every little part and piece, because you can literally look at your parts later on, because your rotor might be made up of like dozens of parts, right? And so you have like one big chunk like this, and you would say like, there's no point in modeling that detail that's like in these crevices somewhere, right? Necessarily. Maybe you just want to do what's more on the face value side of things, because we're not doing product viz. We're not doing like some kind of hardcore simulator, perhaps. Some of you might be, but who knows? But the idea is you want to do that like that. So when you're working your own designs, you can see I got a little block out here going for this guy. It's the same process as that initial step there. This whole idea of doing this, you just have to think about things a little bit logically, start laying out an interesting kind of like shapes and forms and everything else. So you do concept models like this, and I've talked about it in previous videos. You start working out this idea, and eventually you start working on these in detail. You just might work just this one area later on, and depending on what's visible and what's not visible, you might add more functionality to it or aesthetics or whatever, right? And so, like, obviously, we have a gun here. Maybe we need this thing to have a bolt system that rocks back and forth, and this thing needs to open up somehow so it can reload or something, whatever. I know it's an ammo can, but that's the idea. And then so, you can add little nuts, bolts, screws all over this thing later on. You could do it. Details can sometimes be done like separately as like a kit bash. And then so you make like your detail pieces, and you can start to scatter them across the surfaces in like just interesting ways, perhaps. So, but for the most part, you're going to just go piece by piece. And because you have a footprint established now, like we know that this is going to be like this, maybe later on we say like right here, we want a, see if I get that rotated the right way. Oh, I did not. Let's try that again. Maybe we want something in this area, and you could do this in the blockout too. Oh, we're rotated in the scene. That's why. Okay. That doesn't help anything right now that I have everything all messed up over here. I'm not using the right transform either. All right. I hit Z twice to get local orientation or whatever. Yeah, so later on, this could be part of that. And what color is this thing using? Dark gray, I guess. No, light gray. All right. Yeah, so you get where I'm going with that. Like as you're doing these blockouts, you can put them in even right now if you wanted to, but it's just extra information there that, tells you you're going to have to do this in subdivision at some point, because these pieces, oftentimes if they're visible at least, you might have that pushed in with like a boolean later or something. So I don't know. It depends on what you're trying to create. But the idea is that, you start kind of big, work these whole ideas out. And then later on, you can start to convert these into subdivision and working on each individual edge and add additional detail too at the same time. And so little things like that can start to become more of a reality, perhaps, right? It's really simple in nature. It takes time, though. This is where guys always constantly fail. Like just working a good concept together, like this might be kind of fast in some respects. Like this whole the mech itself, like right here, this only took like an hour and a half to kind of put together, like speed modeling it basically. But it's completely wrong in a lot of areas. The design's not flushed out or anything. But to work this into a more proper kind of design, you want to spend a day or two on it at least, maybe if not 3. and then work it to the point that you can say for definitively sure, like you got everything kind of flushed out. Like I didn't finish the feet or anything, right? So the feet are real basic, but you'd want to go through this and start thinking of the feet, just like we were doing earlier. Start making things like this much more complicated, better designs, because at the core of all of it, these pieces and parts that you're going to be blocking out, these designs are going to be like the most important thing for the most part to some degree. Because if you make really just not cool looking stuff, then like if you end up going with something like this, it's going to always look like this to the end. It's establishing that base um, right here, like taking the time for the feet to do this. So just concept modeling, blocking out, spend more time on that than you probably think you should. And you'll find that it just evolves from there. Like I spent a lot of time up here. I didn't spend a lot of time down here. And that's the differences between having like a good looking model and a bad looking model. Like this is starting to get more and more detail added. It's starting to become more and more interesting. This is just nowhere near that same level. So when you're trying to do things too fast, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, if you would, right? You could definitely make things much better, more interesting, spending the time on it without worrying about creating like the most perfect topology or anything like that. Do booleans. The only thing I can say is that try not to create like mesh errors. Like, keep, like if you have like triangles and a little bit of shading issues and stuff, or like n-gons and a little bit of overlap stuff happening like that, that's not the end of the world. But try not to, like have a bunch of stuff folded inside and all warp it back and forth, like, like that and stuff. Don't do stuff like that. Just avoid that. And other than that, have fun. Start kind of blocking out, modeling just like little sections, little parts, little pieces. That puts a limit on yourself. You keep it simple. You keep them low poly at first. You're going to have a much better time coming up with designs and concepts on your own, and don't be afraid of sketching these things first either. Like I spent some time just thinking about mechs, looking at other examples of mechs, and just, somebody was asking basically if I would create a mech that they could retop own. So I'm thinking about, like what I really want to put into a mech that I would put up for download. And not those ones. Let's go to my little sketch, wherever it is. It's somewhere in here. I know it is, but I don't know where. That's the question. I should have named it more proper. Oh, there you go. It's named proper anyways. So like I even sat down. This is just like another hour of sketching, right? Just I did some really quick thumbnails like this, just really quick doodles, and kind of went back over them with a little bit more line work just to see what I could get going. And so you can see like just coming up with cool stuff real quick like this. These are very basic shapes that aren't even that crazy or nothing. And so it's just definitely loosens you up and starts to free you up. You can look at this while you're modeling or whatever. You can look at images like this, obviously. Start looking at other things like this, and just have a lot of fun with getting those shapes going. And for frame stuff like this, because somebody did ask, let me just go over this real quick. Frame type things, a lot of times work with planes, right? So whenever you're working with a plane and you're doing this number, you can use them at off angles if you really wanted to, but those tubular type frame structures are not much different than what we're doing over here, except you don't have them filled, right? We'll stop that one there for now. So it's like a very similar kind of a process here. The only difference is you might do like a solidify on this, right? And then you'll do the mirror. All right, now I'll go across the origin point. So now you have this ability to just work on these planes. And mine are backwards for some reason. Let's flip that maybe. I think they're backwards. Yeah, they were. Okay. Right. So every time I go into edit mode, I turn them off in edit mode. And we can do this all day long. Now, of course, there's more to this. You could use cubes. You can use cylinders. You could do all kinds of fun stuff. But that mirror, you would want to bisect it. Okay. I think you get the idea here with these, right? So frame structures are really fun to make, in my opinion, because of this reason. They're so simple. And especially when you're just blocking them out. Like you can go to the side view here. Press K, C, A, cut, 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 boom. And now we got a cut, right? And so it just looks cool, fast, real easy to do and handle. Adding detail to them is not too hard either. Right. If you need to do things like that later, perhaps. Maybe don't do it right away, but then subdivide it if you want. You get more of a bone structure. You see what I'm getting at? Maybe we'd probably have to work the topo there a little bit more, but for the most part, I think you get the idea. Blockouts, guys. Simple shapes. With just interesting cuts and detail to it. Go a long, long way. Like a huge amount of ways. So basically, yeah, that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned a little bit, and I'll check you out in the next one. All right. Take care.